Hi, everyone. I'm super excited for today. Thank you so much for making my event for Investing for Her. Today, I'm introducing Bruce Firestone, who couldn't make it today with us in person, however, is doing a Q&A with me live over here for us to record and show to you guys. So welcoming Bruce, who is the founder of the Ottawa Senators.
Yep.
He's a mentor for many different students. He's a blogger, a real estate broker, and just an overall entrepreneur. So I'm going to give him a bunch of questions and he's going to answer it specifically for us. So thank you, Bruce. Are you ready to get started?
Well, I'm a little nervous because you got a long list of questions, and I hope I'll be able to answer it. And I hope the audience will enjoy, our interaction over the next number of minutes.
Oh, I'm sure they will. So let's move on to the first question.
Sure.
So, Prof. Bruce, what do you think is the best way for most people to take care of themselves and their families, financially speaking, and why?
Well, I've tried a lot of different things in my career, and I've been the founder of the Ottawa Center, so I was a hockey guy for a while. I've been a real estate developer. I've been a professor at Carleton University's School of Architecture and also the Sprott School of Business. I was the first entrepreneur in residence at the Telfer School of Management. So, it's hard to put me in a box, a round peg in a round hole or a square peg in a square hole. So, I've tried a lot of different things. And for me, financial assets have not really been the way that I think, for myself anyway, that I could support myself and my family for 3 generations. And so what I did was a few years ago, maybe a decade ago, I did some research and I looked at the 100 wealthiest families in Canada, and I asked, well, what are they doing? And maybe they're doing something right and I'm doing something wrong. So I did some research, and out of the top 100 wealthiest families in Canada, 61, almost 2/3, had all or substantially all of their wealth invested in real estate. That told me something. And then I read a story about the Duke of Westminster. They're now on the 7th Duke of Westminster. These are, people in the United Kingdom who have titles, right? They're on the 7th Duke, and he's a young man, a very handsome, good-looking man. And somehow, Naomi, he has to get by on 14,000 US dollars an hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So I thought, well, how the heck are they doing that? And they built up their family wealth through 7 generations.
Yeah.
They have real estate and other interests in Mayfair, that's in central London, in Sydney, Australia, in Vancouver, Canada, and Los Angeles as well. So, for me, there are 2 things that I think are really crucial for a lot of people. One, have a what I call a PB4L, a personal business for life. Develop some kind of side hustle. Tens of millions of people across the planet have some kind of gig or side hustle that they own and they control and it provides for themselves and their families. And then do something on the real estate side, maybe just as simple as owning your own home.
Yeah. Now that leads me to my second question, that if people want to set up their own personal business or personal branding for life, what are the 5 most important things that they should be doing for it?
Well, there's probably more than 5 things that you have to do, and I'm sure there are. But to try and summarize those, I would start with find your why. Simon Sinek says, find your why. And what he means by that is he's referring, I think, to what Mark Twain said, 100 and some years ago. And that is the 2 most important days in your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why. And, a lot of people will tell you follow your passion, but I don't say that. I don't say that. I say find your why and then pursue that. And there's a difference between your why and your passion. Maybe, Naomi, you love horses. And I've had lots of people come to me, I love horses. I am going to buy a horse ranch, right? That's one of the fastest ways to go broke. That might be a passion. It might be a hobby, but it's not a real business. So number 1, find your why. Number 2 on my list would be develop a business model and differentiated value. By differentiated value, I mean add something that's different. Don't just come out with a Me Too product. Develop something that's different. And that isn't because you're coming out with something that's a lower price. I've had many hundreds, maybe even thousands of entrepreneurs come to me and say their differentiated value is that they're going to charge less. That's not differentiated value. You have to think different. And I think that that's actually the slogan for Apple, right? So I stole that from them. Think different. Steve Jobs did that. And then I stole something else from Sir Terry Matthews. He says, find the fastest, quickest route to revenues. And by that, I think he's right. A lot of people say, well, if I have a Super Bowl commercial, which I pay $5 million for, I could find my first launch customers. That's not realistic for most entrepreneurs, maybe almost none of them. So take the fastest, quickest route to revenue. And then I think it's very important to set goals. It can't just be, I'd like to be rich. Well, that's a goal, I suppose, but it's not really quantifiable in the sense that it's not near term, it's not the next month, it's not the next week, it's not the next quarter. So set goals. And one of the things I ask all of the entrepreneurs I coach to do is to find 3 launch clients. Why 3? What's the magic in the 3? You can convince almost anybody, one person, to buy almost anything. So you can get N equals 1, right? Customers. Maybe 2, but probably not 3. So when you have 3 launch customers, you probably have a real business. And then the last thing, and this is not new, develop some kind of a support network. Maybe you can get some coaching, some mentoring. You have people around you who are very positive. Do not have anybody in your life that's very negative. You need positive people around you. They don't always agree with you, but they need to be positive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I always see like you're a product of your environment. The 5 people that you surround yourself with, you're most likely to be like too.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And if you surround yourself with negative people, there's a lot of negative energy.
Yeah, no, for sure. My third question is, what 3 personal characteristics have you found that people need to have in order to be successful entrepreneurs or investors?
So this is a tough one for entrepreneurs, Naomi. Stay focused. Entrepreneurs, by their very nature, at least in my experience, are extremely creative, but they also have short attention spans. And that's made worse by social media, checking your phone 1,000 times a day or whatever you do. And so they come up with an idea, they develop a business model, they start going, they find some launch clients, but then they find something else. Oh, that's really interesting. So you check back a year later or 2 years later, and they're, instead of doing one thing really well, they're doing 4 or 5 things not very well. So number 1 on my list would be to stay focused and rinse and repeat. What you want to do is you want to have a business, if you're interested in a business. It's like turning a crank and making sausages. Every sausage is pretty much like every other. So that would be very high on my list. Another one that's very hard to learn is to remain flexible. When you start a business, you're doing an event. Every event you do, every business you start is an experiment until proven otherwise. So if something's not working, stop doing it and pivot, right? That's very important. And then the third thing was develop your skills. People often think, well, I can do this kind of business or I can do that kind of business. I can do them all. That's not true, at least in my experience. It's not true. You have to have expertise that's related to your why. And if you do that and you develop those skills, you'll probably be successful.
Yeah, for sure. So do women as investors or business owners face any different challenges than men? And if so, how do they overcome them?
I think they do. About 40% of my coaching clients are female. When I started my coaching practice about 10 years ago, I thought probably because of the business nature of it and the real estate nature of it, that probably 80 or 90% of my clients would be male. But that did not turn out to be true. There are a lot of young women and some not so young women who have decided to take ownership of their financial future. I'll give you an example. One young woman, I think she was in her mid-20s, maybe, mid-20s. She wanted to start her own registered massage therapy practice. She was a professional RMT. She had over 1,000 clients, Naomi, 1,000 clients she had. And she wanted to run her own shop because in the shop that she was in before, she was working for the owner there, and there was some abuse going on. There was some harassment going on, I think is the right way to refer to it. And women certainly face that. So she wanted to run her own shop, and she needed about $180,000 to fit up her own shop and go into business for herself. And we went to the Royal Bank of Canada. I went with her, and it was a very good interview. She has strong financials, good credit history, all of that. And then at the very last minute, they said, "Oh, by the way, we're going to ask your parents to sign." I
Oh,
was super mad. I was super mad. I said, that, and of course, the two bankers were men, right? And I
yes.
said, I got mad. I don't often get angry, but I was mad. I have five kids, three beautiful daughters that are all about your age.
Yeah.
And I got mad, and I said, if my client was a man, would you have asked that? Because I don't think they would have. And so
Yeah.
I turned to her and I said, you know what? I think we're going to leave, and we did.
Oh my goodness.
We just
Yeah.
got up and left. That was a no, and we arranged the financing through other means.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to put your foot down. You have to.
Well, it's women do face harassment. I'm very aware of that, and they face hurdles in finance and many other parts of our business. I'll tell your audience, they'll laugh. Many of my female clients invent male executive assistants.
Hmm.
They just invent them. So it's Bill at my great business, or John at my great business, or whatever. And so
Yeah.
they invent them, and so they send out emails, John or from Bill or whoever it might be. And of course, it's them behind it, because they'll find, for example, in technology, if a woman asks for something from a supplier, sometimes they don't even bother answering. So if it comes from John or Bill, you'll get an answer. It's very unfair. And women
Yeah.
often have to work much harder to have success.
Hmm. Yeah. So my fifth question is, can you share a couple of stories about how successful women you have mentored or coached have
Yeah,
are?
I'm glad you asked that, because I really enjoy coaching women, and I'll tell you that women tend to bring a different sensibility to these things than men. They tend to be more detail oriented, and they're willing to do the work. Guys all want money, that's for sure, but maybe aren't necessarily willing to put in the time and the effort to do it. Certainly, the women I coach to a person are willing to do that. I'll give you an example. Erica came to me, and she was a graduate from an American college. She was on a hockey scholarship there. She's a good hockey player. And she started something. I mean, I would never have imagined this would be a successful startup, but it's a hell of a success. She started a platform for dog walkers. You would go, what the heck? So I don't know what it costs, but for like $500 a month, she can handle, for a dog walker, setting up their website, setting up their scheduling, setting up their billing, all of that stuff. And believe it or not, dog walkers make real money using her platform. I mean, some of them, and I think quite a few of them are in the six-figure income walking dogs. I said, Erica, can that be real? And she said, it's very real. And, if you walk a dog for a rich dude, maybe you charge him or her, $35 an hour, but you don't just walk one dog, you might walk up to five. So you could make, $165 an hour dog walking. You work it out, that's over $100,000 a year. So her technology business is very simple, and it's very, very successful. Well, that's an example of one. And another one is a woman in BC who had a business installing blinds. And again, not very sexy business, installing blinds or dog walking. I mean, it's not putting a man or woman on Mars. I admit that. But her name was Linda, and she had a brilliant business model, and that is, she would go to developers who were building multi-res buildings, like 3-story, 5-story multi-res buildings, apartment buildings, and she would sell them blinds, and she would sell it to them in a very clever way. So her differentiated value was her sales methodology. She used a concept I call negative cost selling. What the heck is negative cost selling? You can't even look it up, because I just made up the term. But negative cost selling, she would go to a developer. So let's say you were building with your dad, Richie, say, you were building a 3-story, 35-unit apartment building. And she would say, Naomi, we're going to put blinds in your building, and it's going to cost, say, $30,000 or $35,000 to do that. And you might say, well, why would I do that? I can let my tenants, put up their own blinds. And of course, students will put up the marijuana flag or the cannabis flag. Somebody else will put a bed sheet up that's orange. And so your building from the road will look really awful. right? So she'll show you, and she'll say, I'm glad you said that. So she'll show you a picture of an apartment building with her blinds on it, which has very good curb appeal. And she'll show you another one that it's a very nice building, but looks like heck. You follow
Yeah.
what I'm saying? And so
Yeah.
she'll say, here's what's going to happen, Naomi. By paying me $35,000, you're going to get better tenants who stay longer because the curb appeal and the brand of your building is going to be better. You're going to make money by hiring me. So your cost of hiring me is negative. And I'll show you some spreadsheets that prove it. These people have been fantastically successful. And Linda turned that business into also gave her the ability to acquire quite the real estate portfolio. So she followed, the Prof. Bruce methodology, which was having a personal business for life and also some real estate.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, what is more secure in your views, a regular job or owning your own business with some real estate assets on the side?
Well, there you go. So, most people think that a job is more secure. That is until they get laid off.
Yeah.
All right. And you don't control your own future. And listen, I'm not saying that being an entrepreneur is the be all and end all for everyone. It isn't. There's a lot of stress that goes with hosting an event, a lot of stress that goes with starting a business. But I'll give you an example. A good friend of mine worked for the government of Canada, and his first name was Art, and he was there for 25 years. But the government of Canada went through some difficult times and they laid him off after 25 years. He thought that was, can you get any more secure than a government job? But he was laid off. And
Yeah.
he has a PhD in African anthropology. And he had been doing post-project reviews for the government of Canada for 25 years. And Art came to me and said, he was still relatively young. He had kids who were teenagers. And he said, Bruce, what am I going to do now? And I said, I don't know, Art. Maybe you should start a business now. Oh, no, I'm going to apply for a job. So he typed up this is back in the day, really before the internet got going, or maybe just as the internet was getting going. He typed up 500 resumes and came to see me about 7 or 8 months later. He had not had a single interview. There isn't a lot of demand in the private sector for people with PhDs in African anthropology. And he came to me, and now his severance was running out. Now he's really sweating it. So I said, well, maybe you should buy a business. If you can't get a job, you can't get an interview. And he was in his 50s. So by the time you're in your 50s, it's tough to get a job. And especially with his background in government, it just wasn't going to be very helpful to most private sector employers. So he said, what kind of business? I said, well, Art, you're really not cut out to be an entrepreneur. So maybe you should buy a franchise. And because a franchise, they tell you how to market and what to sell and everything else. He said, what kind of franchise? I said, I don't know. So we looked at a bunch of them, and finally I said, maybe you should buy a Subway franchise.
Okay.
Yes. And he said, well, okay, because I need to do something. So anyway, I called up the regional manager for Subway and I said, what is your worst performing store in the area? What's the one that's really awful? Because there's going to be one. If you had 10 people reporting to you at work and I asked you who's your worst employee, you would know instantly, right? Oh yeah, that's Bruce. Yeah, he's terrible. So anyway, he said, yeah, I got a store here. It loses $3,500 a month. I said, that's the one we want to buy. And so he bought a Subway store for $35,000, including all the fit up and including the franchise fee. And it was nothing, right? Because they just wanted a better operator. So they got rid of the other operator. They put Art in place. In his first year, he was able to turn around that store so that he was making about $2,500 a month for himself and his family. So not very much. But in year 2, it jumped to about 80,000, and by year 3, he was well into the $130,000 range, and then he bought a second one, and he just never looked back, and he was much happier. I have to tell you, he did his own marketing, he did his own hiring and firing, his banking, everything. He really enjoyed that, and now I think he's in his 80s now, and he's still doing it.
Wow.
It's really fantastic. So I mean, at least from my point of view, I think having a job that you love and you're good at, you have the skills at, and you remain focused on is probably in some ways maybe more secure.
Yes, for sure. My next question to you is I've heard that you teach something called NEWPIN,
Yeah.
NEWPIN,
Yeah.
and New Era Financial Planning. So can you explain a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, I'll tell you a personal story. After I left the Senators, I kind of wandered in the desert looking for my next, thing. I didn't know what I was going to do next. I'd been a professor, I'd been a hockey guy, I'd been a real estate developer. I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. Um, and one of the things I did was I actually went and talked to the three top financial planners, or so-called top financial planners in where I live. And I thought their advice, and I hope I'm not offending anybody, but I thought their advice was terrible.
Mhm.
One of them tried to sell me a life insurance policy, which would have cost $10,000 a month, which is a lot of money. And he didn't tell me that if I had been stupid enough to sign that agreement, he would have got an $80,000 commission. I found that out later. So I thought the advice I was getting was very, very poor. So I decided to invent my own.
Yeah.
And it won't surprise any of your attendees today that my new pin plan is very simple. Own some real estate, have a little bit of cash reserve. My dad used to call that your ARN reserve, right? Have a little bit of cash around that you can, if things go wrong, you can access. Develop some kind of personal business for life. Mine is, at this stage of my life, is coaching. Um,
Mhm.
you might have some insurance, but cheap insurance, maybe some term insurance. If you have a family, you might want to have some term insurance, or maybe some kind of an annuity that you buy at some point. You might have an independent pension plan. But overall, the idea is to keep it very simple and find ways to pass on whatever assets you accumulate over your life to your heirs.
Mhm.
So
For
it's very
sure.
simple. It's not complicated.
Yeah. And I think that finding a sustainable way that's also resilient to everything that goes on in the world to build that generational wealth, that's going to be the hardest part. And at face value, people look at all of these and they're like, well, how do I get started on all of that, you know?
Yeah, well, it doesn't have to be really complicated. There are a ton of side hustles that I mean, I don't know how many I've seen. I've in the 10 years I've been doing the coaching thing, I think I've seen over 2,500 people develop some kind of a personal business for life. And people are incredibly inventive. Think about Linda and what she did with her blinds business. Think about Erica, what she did with dog walkers. I mean, who knew? I mean, there's
Yeah.
just infinite. Human beings are quite creative, so you have to think again, what is your why? Where are your skills? Can you develop the skills to be successful, and then go at it?
Yeah, for sure. So you say in your writings that investors beat savers all or most of the time, and why is that?
Well, actually, I did a simulation. I'm an engineer as well, so I can't resist doing building some models and then running some simulations. So I quite a few years ago, must be 10 or 12 years ago, I ran a simulation. I invented this world, the world of Grassel, Grassel. I don't know why I called it Grassel. It was just an invented name. And in Grassel, there were three groups. The inhabitants of Grassel, this world, were all ants. And there were worker ants, there were saver ants, and there were investor ants. So there are three classes of people, little people,
Yeah.
the size of ants. And so I invented this universe. It was a flat universe. It was a two-dimensional universe. And in that, there were three classes. I ran hundreds of simulations. The worker ants who just they got their paycheck, so to speak, and they spent it. They got their paycheck and spent it. The worker ants ended up not surprisingly with nothing, because most people are terrible savers. I don't know about you, but I'm a very good investor, but I am a terrible saver. And I generally
Mhm.
find if my students or the people I coach have savings, I check back in a year or two, the savings are gone. They spent it on a new computer, a holiday in the Dominican Republic, they bought a new truck,
Yeah.
right? Savings go away. I mean, it's nice to have $10,000 or $100,000 in the bank, but that can disappear. So the worker ants ended up with nothing. The savers ended up with something, but the investors ended up pretty much owning the whole planet.
Yeah. No, for sure. And what do you think financial, like what roles do financial planners have in all of this?
Well, certainly the financial planner who did not disclose an $80,000 commission check that he would have gotten had I bought that life insurance policy, that's not somebody you want on your team.
Yeah.
So I am the wrong person, and I mentioned this to you before we started. I'm the wrong person to ask that question to, because I thought the advice I was getting was very poor, and so I invented my own. So I'll leave that question for now.
Yeah. So what also you also talked about GTBMR, get the business model right.
Yeah.
What is that? And can you give an example of how this works in the real world?
I'd be happy to. You know what this is?
A cell phone?
Yeah, it's an iPhone.
Yes.
I think it's a 13. Okay, I'll give you an example. Before Steve Jobs invented the iPhone, there were some good cell phones out there. For example, I don't know, you're probably too young to remember, but Motorola made those flip phones. They kind of looked like those Star Trek things, you know? And
Yes.
Motorola's phones were actually quite reliable. You could drop them, you step on them, you couldn't kill them. So here's what Motorola's business model was. They would make a cell phone, and back then they would sell it to you, Naomi, for $100. That cell phone was so good, it would last forever, certainly 5-10 years. So Motorola, they wouldn't make $100. Motorola might sell it to a store, which would sell it to you. So the store made the $100, and then maybe they sent Motorola $40. So Motorola from their flip phones made $40 or $50 once every 5 or 10 years. Steve Jobs invented the iPhone, that is a platform for, back in the day, iTunes, but now of course is Apple Music. There are any number of revenue streams that this phone supports. Excuse me. And it's what has made Apple worth $3 trillion is not the sale of iPhones. It's the revenue streams that exist on that platform. The iPhone is what has driven Apple to be the most valuable company on this planet. And you and your attendees today may say, well, that doesn't apply to me. Business models apply to the smallest businesses imaginable and to the largest business on this planet, which currently, by value, is Apple. And Steve Jobs, before he passed away, Naomi, spent 50%, let me repeat that, 50% of his time on Apple's business models, not product, business models. What are the revenue streams that you can create from your platform? Think about Erica and her dog walking platform. She's got all kinds of revenue streams that come out of that. And get the business model right is one of the first steps that you do before you launch a small business, a real estate venture, a tech company, a service company. I don't care what it is.
For sure. It's interesting to see how his work sparked so much creativity and entrepreneurship for other people, but using his platform as well.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. Well, Apple, as you know, is a gated community, and you have to be inside the happy walls of Apple to make any money.
Yes. No, for sure. You say that you help people find their why. Why is that important?
Well, I'll tell you and your attendees a personal story. My father, before he passed away, said that people should never retire. You know, if you retire and you sit in front of a TV all day, you won't be alive very long. And I hate golf. I'm a terrible golfer, so I wasn't going to retire and play golf, and I certainly wasn't going to sit in front of the TV all day.
Yeah.
So my dad said, never retire, but you can change what you do. And so there I was, getting ready to retire from, I was a prof at the University of Ottawa, and I remember my dad's advice. And so I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. So I actually hired myself a life coach, and she was fantastic. I worked with her for a number of months. And towards the end of our coaching together, she said, Bruce, I think you'd make a good coach. And I said, oh, no, I don't think so. If you're having marital problems or you're having problems with your partner, Naomi, don't come to me. I wouldn't be any good at that. Oh, she said, no, let me finish. I'm not good at letting people finish. And she said, let me finish. I think you'd be a good business and real estate coach. You've done a lot of different things in business. You've done a lot of things in real estate. And I think people might, learn something from you and benefit from that. So I said, oh, I really like that idea. And when somebody like me, Naomi, hears a good idea, or what I think is a good idea, I take action almost immediately. I probably had a primitive website up within 24 hours saying, yeah, Prof. Bruce, real estate and business coach, not knowing if anybody would want any coaching from me. But it turned out that they did, mostly in the States and Canada, a little bit overseas. And I can't tell you how much joy I get. I have some of my clients with $300 million businesses, $500 million businesses. I have a couple that have reached $1 billion, and I have lots of them who are making $10,000 or $15,000 a month, and they're perfectly happy with that, which is fine. So, it's like having a bunch of kids growing up and doing cool things, and I get a lot of joy. There's another benefit. I thought I knew real estate when I started coaching 10 years ago and business. But when you coach really smart people, they ask you hard questions. And so here I am 10 years later, they've taught me almost as much as I've taught them.
For sure. If viewers want to know more about what you teach, mentor, coach, are there any books, video, and courses they could read, watch, take that would help them?
Sure. I mean, if your attendees want to know a little bit more about me, they can go to my personal website. It's a little bit better than it was 10 years ago. It's brucemfirestone.com. You have to stick the M in there. That's my middle initial. So brucemfirestone.com, and you'll see a bunch of stuff about me. All lies, mind you, but it's all there. And
Awesome.
what I'd like to do, if I have your permission, is I'd like to send you some links that might help. I'm going to send you a short handbook I wrote called Business Model Illustrations. And you can make it available to your attendees if you want. It has 10 cases in there. 3 are business cases and 7 are real estate ones. And it's only 67 pages long. So it's not, I've written some things that are hundreds of pages. So this is, I think it's 67 or maybe it's, 67 pages. So it has 10 cases in there. And I think it would really help your audience if they were interested to read it. And like I said, it's not too long and has lots of pictures in it. So, it's an easy read, but it's really fun. And I think the story of Linda is in there. The one I told about the lady in BC with the blinds business, I'm pretty sure she's in there. And I'm going to send you something else that I wrote quite a long time ago, but still probably relevant, called 25 Steps to Success. All right. And you could send that on to your listeners or viewers or attendees if you want. And the last thing I think that might help is during the pandemic, in the early stages of the pandemic, I was wondering if there was something I could do to help people. And so I did a course called Pivot. And I had a few hundred people sign up for that course. And I invited, I think, 10 of my former students to give 10 lectures on what they had done. One of them was, one of the lectures was done by Ryan North. He's a former student of mine. And I think your audience will enjoy this. Ryan is an IT guy, a tech guy. Tall, I think he's like 6'8" or 6'9", super handsome and a nice guy. And in my class, this has got to be 20 years ago, at Carleton Sprott School of Business, every one of my students had to start a business in the 3 or 4 months that I had them in the class. You couldn't take an entrepreneurship class without starting a business. Yeah. So I said, Ryan, what are you going to do? And because everybody had to run their ideas by me before they actually began. I wanted to make sure that they were not, they were appropriate. And so Ryan said, I'm going to start a cartoon strip, Bruce. I said, Ryan, I thought you were a tech guy. Do you know how to draw? I said, absolutely not. I can't draw a thing. I said, oh, okay. So, okay, what kind of a cartoon strip? So he got clip art. You know what clip art is, right? I mean, he got free clip art. And he created 6 scenes. There were 3 dinosaurs. in this, it was a dinosaur comic. So there were six scenes, and there were three characters. One was a T-Rex. He's a big male chauvinist, he's the chauvinist. And there were two female dinosaurs who were warm and nurturing and wise, right? And so the comic strip, believe it or not, the images never change. They're the same every day. What changes is the dialogue. And the first time you see the comic, you go, what the heck is the big idea here? But then you realize there's a brilliant, Ryan's mind is behind this comic strip, and the interplay between these three dinosaurs is hilarious. He has still running that 20 years later, and it has made him a world famous comic strip writer. He goes to Comic-Con and he's mobbed, and he has launched a number of projects. One of them in the early days of Kickstarter, I should share this with your audience. He wanted to raise $20,000 US on Kickstarter to fund one of his projects, which was, I think he was doing Hamlet as a choosable path adventure. I mean, he's a tech guy. And so, but he failed to raise $20,000. He raised $520,000 instead.
Yeah.
And like it's an amazing success story. So it's very hard to predict what will work and what won't work. And he has a business model behind it, because he knows that his business model in the early days was simple. He would sell merchandise from that website, because it was he has hundreds of thousands of readers, and they love buying his merchandise, which is, for example, you could buy the T-Rex on a T-shirt saying your family is made of meat.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to be young to enjoy that sort of humor, but it's very offbeat. I mean, Ryan is a genius, and there's no doubt about it. And so that's the kind of thing that you will learn. If anybody wanted to audit the course, they're welcome to do it. It's the Pivot course, and these are 10 former students of mine coming back and talking about, in his case, his art. I've got a tech example. I think Erica gave her story about the dog walking platform, and there's a bunch of them. It's really fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bruce. This is all of the questions that I have for today. But it was wonderful meeting you and asking you and bombarding you with all these questions. I'm sure that everyone at my event is going to appreciate this. So thank you so much.
Well, I hope I was helpful, Naomi, and I'm glad to be here, and I wish I was there in person, but I'm going to be out of town. So I look forward to seeing you in person at some future date.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much.